I'm at the Red House with Zach McCraw, and glad you're here. And you haven't been here in a while. I'm glad you're back.
I'm glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
So, some behind-the-scenes trivia. You were one of very few people that I interviewed for, like, one of my early attempts at a podcast, but it kind of fizzled out pretty quickly because, well, it was a really weird story how it fizzled out. But anyway, it was you were featured on that podcast. I taped it and everything, but then that podcast didn't go very far. But so you're here again for the real thing.
That's right. That's right. I love it. I love being here. It's a great place.
Yeah, I'm glad to have you. So, what's been new with you?
That's so open-ended because I have so much going on.
Yeah, no kidding.
You know, I make art all the time, and also I manage a studio gallery space downtown now, and still make music, manage and promote musicians, and
oh really?
So yeah, just kind of really staying really busy and really active in art and trying to do all I can and everything.
Yeah.
Well,
okay. We're gonna probably work the story up to the gallery.
Okay.
You know what? Maybe we should start at the gallery and work, and then we'll go back to your origin here in a minute. But
okay, that works.
We've been talking about this gallery, you and I. I've been like trying to make a plan to come see it, and I have yet to succeed in doing that. But can you tell me about this gallery space?
Okay, yeah. We're on the 9th floor of the Liberty Plaza building, which is in downtown Winston, and we have the whole entire 9th floor. There are 35 art studios that we're renting out to artists. We have about 10 left right now to rent out. So we're filling up really fast. We have a lot of painters, a lot of photographers, some video artists, and then some collage artists. And we're just kind of bringing in whoever really wants to come and be a part of the space and really activate it. And we have a podcast studio that we're renting out as well, and that's going really good. And
what's that one called?
We don't really have a name for the studio, but
okay.
we just rent it out to people. The one that's using it the most now, it's a group called the Dose Art Collective, and they use it for their podcast, and they put it out every few weeks.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Man, the first thing that comes to mind about that is like in Winston for so long, the arts have been on street level. You know, they
right.
like it's like up in the towers, up on the second and up floor is for people living or people like in the business world, in the corporate world.
Sure.
It's kind of interesting to hear about an art space that's off the street.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, it's really kind of wild and revolutionary feeling to be so high up, and then when all the other floors in the building you get off and they look like law offices and things like that, and then you go to our floor and you get off the elevator, it's just you see nothing but art everywhere. And so we've all the walls we've filled with art, and so it's really just a completely immersive space, and there's always people there working, and we're doing more to have more kind of get-togethers and like collage nights and classes and all kinds of things, just to really just use the space and give it to the artists and just let them really just take over and go wild, you know?
That is like that's how Winston should be, you know?
Yeah.
That's like the culture.
I think so.
That sounds like old school Winston.
For sure. Yeah. And that's really, I've had friends that have been in Winston for a long time and experienced that kind of what went on 20 years ago. And they say the same thing. And that's really kind of like my MO for the project is to, I never really forgot what it was like or what it felt like or what we did, and so now having the opportunity to keep doing that and to like bring that back and keep it alive feels really good.
I bet, man.
Yeah.
All right. I think that's a good way to segue into some of your history.
Okay.
Where are you originally from?
Virginia. Yeah, near Martinsville, Virginia.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how did you end up down here?
My parents took jobs down in Winston. My mom worked for Sara Lee, which became Hanes Brands. And so they were commuting to Winston for a few years, and then we just moved. We moved to King in 98.
Old King.
Yeah. Moved to King in 98. So went to Chestnut Grove and then went to West Stokes, and
okay.
I
went to Chestnut Grove as well. Didn't end up making it to West Stokes. I went to a private school before I did all that, or before I ever made it to high school.
Yeah.
knowing you and knowing just like what kind of artist you are and capable of being, it's interesting to think of you in the context of King, which
Right.
is just not an artsy.
Yeah.
Like all props to King. It's not like it lacks all creativity or innovation or whatever, but you know
No.
what I mean. The
Sure.
culture up there
Sure.
isn't one that isn't one that revolves around the arts.
No.
Did you feel at home in King?
Yeah, it's just I guess coming up when in middle school and then early high school is when a lot of the people our age were starting bands. And then you would come down to Winston and there was like uprisings on Trade Street, which was Pablo's, and then Ziggy's and Brouhaha's, and like all these like indie bands and all these like young people were starting like ska bands and punk bands and hardcore groups. And so that really kind of culture really, I think it spread out to the suburbs in King, because it was in middle school started going to shows. And then, by high school, I was playing in like a punk band and putting on shows at like churches and, the YMCA, Camp Haynes and stuff. And really kind of making a scene or making your own kind of thing happen. And so I think around that time, King, we'd put together shows and there'd be like 5 bands that went to West Stokes and South Stokes and stuff. And so it, kind of, we weren't given it, but we kind of made it.
Yeah.
We made it happen.
When you say putting together shows, you mean in Winston or in King?
In King, yeah.
Interesting. Where at?
We played a lot at the First Christian Church. They have like a fellowship hall with a stage and everything. We did a bunch of shows there. We played at Camp Haynes because I worked there, and so I had I would set up shows in their like rec center. Where else did we play in King? I know
Camp Haynes.
we played at Poplar Springs. It was like churches and stuff, so because it was all kind of tied into that like Christian ska, Christian punk kind of scene, and then you could just kind of use that as an avenue to kind of jump in and be like, we're a punk band too,
Right.
let's make this happen. Yeah.
I started a lot of my music stuff in King, but at a totally different time period,
Well, that's where I met you.
Yeah.
That's where I was at the coffee shop.
Yes, I was a
Right.
real asshole to you, if I'm being honest. And I knew that this would come up, but you were playing also, I think, with Dylan V at the time.
Right, yeah.
A friend that we both lost.
For sure.
Within the last year or 2 years, I guess.
Yeah.
Wasn't it in 2020?
Yeah, I think so.
I think it was.
Or 21, yeah.
Yeah, we'll probably talk about Dylan V in a minute, but yeah, I mean, we were, King was at that point. All there was the coffee shop up
Right.
there, and and of course at that point we aren't talking about high school bands quite as much. I ran an open mic up there, and we did have some high school bands that like,
Yeah.
some that I remember that were hilarious, and anyway, but the culture also was a lot of acoustic music, like adults coming to play, shit like that. It's just a totally different thing.
Right.
Less of that DIY scene, like what I hear from people who kind of grew up doing punk band stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was cool though. I mean, it's always good when you can go to a town where there's not really anything happening and make something happen.
Yeah.
Like King. And I remember coming to a bunch of the open mic nights, and they were, it was always good just to see people doing things, and making things happen. So, yeah.
Yeah. You always wish it
Yeah.
was more.
Sure.
But anyway, so did you gravitate to Winston early on in that whole time, in that time period? Were you gravitating to Winston already?
Yeah, I mean, I guess just because it was the closest city in proximity that you could go and see things happen.
Yeah.
But yeah, a lot of the way that I got introduced, I guess, to Winston was some of the guys from West played in a band called Lucky Seven. It was a ska group, and then they would play down in Winston at the Uprisings place, and they play with like Beloved.
Okay.
And all those like when Beloved was like a new metal band or something, like really early on. And so then just started going down there, and and then Ziggy's would have shows, and Brouhaha's was right next door, and then there'd be house shows and stuff, and so always just kind of it was the place you could go and see music.
Hell yeah.
In Winston, and then finding out about PS211, which became the Warehouse. Or was the Warehouse, then it was PS211, and then they changed the name back to the Warehouse.
I don't know about PS211.
Was Cranky's. It was, before. So the Warehouse building, it was called the Warehouse. And then I think they had some other people that were kind of booking it, and they rebranded as PS211, was what they were calling the Warehouse. And they had... It was really wild. I mean, you could go one night and there'd be a hardcore show. You could go the next night, it'd be a goth night with like an industrial dance party, and then the next night would be folk acoustic stuff. And so it was really all over the place and really kind of eclectic. You could see a bunch of weird people and have fun.
Yeah. Did you know those people pretty well that were like kind of behind that whole movement?
I didn't know them when I first started going, but then when I started playing with, so then after they were PS211, they kind of switched back to a guy named Blake Tesh, was living at the Warehouse, and he was doing most of the booking. Him and a guy named Kemp were kind of like pulling in a bunch of. Then it became more kind of like a no wave experimental music. Kind of free jazz, indie, more towards that and less like hardcore and all that kind of stuff. But started playing in the group with Savannah Tuttle. We had a group called Hide and Seek that played at the Warehouse a bunch. But she was like 15 and she worked the door there. And so me and my friend Devin, we were making music, and we wanted to play there because it was like the biggest like alternative underground venue that you could find anywhere, and there's a bunch of stuff happening all the time. So we said we got Savannah in our band because she knew everybody, and so through that kind of like got
Smart.
welcomed into that that scene, and got to know everybody. And
Yeah, that's a smart move.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So you're younger. You come across the Warehouse. Which, by the way, do you remember when you first came here? Like, do you remember how you even learned what was going on down there from being up in King?
I guess just being in that kind of network of finding out about shows, and just hearing about like where there are shows happening, and then there were bands playing there all the time, and so just ended up there.
Yeah, probably. I guess same as me. Like in around like. You know somebody that knows what's going on, and for young artists that want more than what King might have to offer, you end up kind of like gravitating to somewhere that has more to offer, like that. Makes sense.
Oh, yeah.
I guess I'm surprised I hardly even knew about the period before Cranky's when it was the Warehouse. Like I wasn't around back then. When I first started going there, it was Cranky's. But that PS211, I just never heard of that. Like, was it like the type thing that there was a sign on the wall that said that, or that said the Warehouse ever?
I don't know. Maybe. I know they had 211 painted on the outside of the building because that's the address.
I guess PS might be Patterson.
Project Space.
Project Space.
Project Space 211.
I see. Okay.
Was I don't know if they ever had a sign or anything, and I don't ever remember ever seeing any signs saying the Warehouse either.
Yeah.
But it was on flyers and things, I guess, was the way that it was known.
Yeah.
But
then it kind of graduated to Cranky's. And I've heard a little bit of that story, like when they were pushed, I guess, to kind of legitimize their operation and all that stuff.
Well, because like when they had PS211, they didn't even, where the bar is now, there wasn't anything in that room. There wasn't a bar. There wasn't anything. They started just handing out drinks out of like coolers and stuff, and that kind of became like then they kind of built a bar, and then they kind of, we're going to, turn it into a bar, and then like kind of kept just building and building and building off of that. And then, I think at some point they were, I don't remember, I don't know if they started roasting coffee first and then called it Cranky's, or they kind of did that all at one time. I do remember the reason why they called it Cranky's at first was because it was going to be a coffee shop and bicycle repair shop. And the crank, and then that's what they got that logo as like a bicycle crank.
You're right.
And so, because it was Mitch, who is one of the owners, and then a guy named Dylan Angel that was in town at the time. Dylan was real into bicycles, and they turned that back lot where Dave's been doing that Yeti Club. It was full of bicycles at one point when they first did Cranky's, and they were going to just do coffee and bike repair.
Huh.
And then the bike thing didn't last. I don't think it lasted maybe a year or something. And
I
it
never
just-
knew that bit of
Yeah.
history.
Mhm.
And yet, like, I always thought of it as a crank or something. Like, I never really thought much about what that logo meant.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's really funny. I just didn't know that.
Mm-hmm.
There's always some shtick, you know. There's
Oh,
always
yeah.
some like shit always changes.
Oh, for
you know?
sure. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, they were iconic. They're like an important pivot moment. I feel like in every creative person's time in Winston, especially prior to when they stopped having music.
Right.
You know, it was just like that was a gateway. It was a gateway kind of place for a lot of us. Even for me, who wasn't really around for the warehouse stuff, and I was on the younger side of all that. And by the time I started playing there, I think shows were still significant at Cranky's, but it felt to me like I was part of a wave of people that were coming in that were like the second string, and we weren't like the cool kids or something. We were like guests, and they were sort of like, okay.
Yeah.
And then it was within, I mean, I started playing there when I was 19 or something, and then by the time I was 26, they probably stopped having music, you know?
Yeah. It definitely felt like, because I remember when Wish was doing what was the name of his
The
event?
shuffle.
The Shuffle. That's
Yeah.
right. I remember that. I remember that time because I had left for a while and came back. And when I came back, it was like at the very end of that Shuffle. Because I got a studio. They used to have studios in the back there.
That's right.
Because the stage was there, and then the door just to the right there were art studios. And then we had a gallery, which is now where the bathrooms are. They renovated the gallery and made it a bathroom. But yeah, I had a studio there, so I remember that kind of thing. But it was just, by that time, a lot of the community that was living upstairs, because when they were doing the warehouse, there were probably 10 people living upstairs and maybe 2 or 3 people living in the basement. And so it was like you could go there at any time and see all your friends, you know, and there'd always be some kind of a communal, you know, happening or somebody just hanging out that you could just go and just be around some artists and be part of a thing.
Yeah.
And then around the time that the Shuffle was happening and all that, a lot of them had moved out, you know, and gotten older and just like, we want to get our own house and, you know, grow up in some kind of way, or just have your own space that's not a part of,
For sure.
you know, a collective consciousness of 15 other people with wild dreams and everything too. So I don't think it really lost anything, but it had changed a little bit, you know. It kind of had, you know, there weren't as many people around, or that kind of core like collective of people, you know.
Yeah. So, did you say that did you move out of the area for a while?
I did, yeah. I moved to Denver, Colorado at first, and was living in a DIY space down there or out there. I met some people on MySpace that were into some like similar kind of music and art and things that I was making, and they were running a DIY space out there in an old warehouse in downtown Denver.
Another old warehouse.
Well, it was a pretty big place. It was just a big open warehouse, and it was run by some people that were a group called Friends Forever. They were on like Load Records or something. It was like they're like a noise band, and they had this shtick where they would pull up in a van, and they had all their gear in the back of this van. They'd open up their van and perform like out on the street or something, and sometimes like they would pull their van like into clubs and stuff and perform. So they were like, so it was their warehouse space in Denver that we moved into, and just had lots of shows and had lots of art and did a lot of things, and we're right in the middle of a big, you know, metropolis of Denver, Colorado, you know. So
How do a bunch of van hippies end up with a giant warehouse?
I think, you know, and it was around that time, because this was like 2006. That was like a really kind of popular thing, that because we ended up doing a lot of touring and stuff, like because we would leave Denver and go up to like Washington State and then go down the California coast and back out through the desert and come back up to Denver. And it was pretty easy to do. I mean, you could do that in a week or something. but like everywhere you would go in America, really, it felt like that you could find some kind of DIY space, and I guess just really cheap real estate in these like half condemned warehouse buildings that I guess were kind of overlooked in many ways, and you could get for really cheap and get all your friends to live there and basically have to pay nothing, and you'd have just like a free zone in many ways. And that's where we would play most of the times when we would go places, to be like find all these DIY spaces. So kind of like the warehouse was, and then you could go to other cities, and because in Denver because we had our place, and there were probably 2 or 3 or 4 other warehouse spaces that people were just kind of taking advantage of during that time.
That is so interesting. And I guess you said 2006. Maybe that's after. I don't know what was going on economically, I guess, that would have made that prime time for that kind of thing to happen. Maybe something did, but because that's before 2008, right? Anyway, I don't know. I don't know how to explain that, but it's very interesting. Also very interesting. That sounds like quite an adventure to be in Colorado there, and then be able to just kind of, you're right in the center of the country, and it sounds like you were taking advantage of that and spreading out all over the place.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, and then from Denver, I started playing with the group in Portland. And so I was in Portland for a little bit, but that was kind of our home base. But we just mostly just toured and traveled, and I didn't spend a lot of time in Portland. But
timeline-wise, as we're talking about your story, was it pretty much that? Like, did you leave Winston from the whole Crankies thing, playing music in town there, and then go to Denver, and then go to Portland?
Right. I came back from Denver for, I mean, it was less than a year. I lived back here for a while.
Okay.
And then went back out there with friends that I had met in Denver. Kind of just worked that way.
To Oregon?
Right. So
what was that touring like? Were you just living on the road all the time?
Yeah, it was really great. It was a lot of fun. Yeah, we I think the longest tour that we did was, I think we were on the road like 60 days. It was a long thing, because we left Portland and then went out. We went down through like Idaho and Denver, and then out through, I guess the Midwest, out to Chicago, and then played all the way up to New York, all the way down the East Coast, all the way out, and then through Texas, and then we went to Mexico, and then back up through California, and just did a full U.S. kind of thing, and it was a blast. It was really a lot of fun.
Yeah, that's the dream, man. Like, that's where it's at.
Yeah.
Any of those places that you fell in love with most of all? Where did you go in Mexico?
We went to just over the border from Texas into a place called Juarez, Mexico.
Okay.
It was supposed to be very dangerous. It was. I never felt in danger. But yeah, that's where we were in Juarez.
Were you playing to like Mexican people?
Yeah.
How did they respond?
Good. It was it was really kind of, I guess we weren't that far over the border. I think it was maybe 30 minutes or something.
Yeah.
Into the city. And it was just a bunch of punk kids. It was like really kind of because I think the sort of like, the Mexican culture, they really have a vibrant like punk scene. They're really into that kind of music too. So it didn't feel like any kind of difference really, other than, it was just a bunch, local people that were into the same things.
That's badass.
Yeah.
So you toured like the U.S. I kind of interrupted your train of thought, but
No,
was there places throughout the U.S. that meant the most to you?
I really liked California. I had a good time in California. I really liked the Southwest, and just mostly because of just the difference of what it is from here. Because I've lived practically in the country my whole life, surrounded by trees. Then you got there and it's nothing but just, endless landscapes of just dirt, and it's so fascinating. And just to be somewhere completely different than you live, and just experiencing that for a while.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was really kind of striking, in many ways.
Yeah. Like Texas, like New Mexico, places like that, or Arizona. Maybe?
Arizona was the one that felt the most like alien, from from here.
I've never made it out there.
You should. I think you'd have a blast.
Dude, I want to go
Yeah.
so bad.
Yeah.
I've been like, it's kind of like a this shape, I guess. I've traveled to Michigan to play, and it was kind of a straight shot. And then a lot of states to the east of Michigan I've played, and then same deal with Texas, and then all the southeast, But I don't know what that was. Some flying around my eye like I'm a horse, but. Haven't made it to the middle, haven't made it to Arizona, and haven't gone further west than Texas and all that. Really want to. Very envious of the experience you're describing.
Oh yeah, I'd like to do it some more. I'd like to travel some more. I'm actually working with an artist right now. I'm helping him plan a tour for next year. He's like a R&B rapper. His name's Draco. And funny enough, I went to school with his mom in King, and his granddad's the mayor of King right now currently.
Really?
And he's like 20 years old, but yeah. So that's something I've been doing for maybe since like 2018.
Nice.
Is working with local rappers and things like that, like booking shows and kind of connecting them together and all that kind of good stuff. And so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds like throughout, I mean, even from the start, curation was a part of what you've been doing, like community building and curation in addition to actually creating art. That always just something that you felt like drawn to or something?
I guess so. Well, just kind of, I guess in high school I wanted to play shows, and I wanted to be in a band. And just, I guess the easiest way to do that was to play in a band and do my own show or just put together shows, you know.
Yeah.
Like I want to do this thing, and you know, not that I can't play with on other people's shows, but it's just going to be so much easier just to do it myself, you know.
Right.
Just like make it happen, and it just kind of never stopped doing that.
Sometimes the curation of a show is kind of also, I mean, it's the same. It's a similar approach to creativity too. You know, you're being creative, thinking about the combination of people and
For sure.
how it's all going to flow and all this stuff.
Oh yeah, definitely. And with the gallery too, with curating, because I've curated all the shows up to this point. To me, it feels really good to like give people those opportunities to show their work and to like express themselves, because like I've always valued it in my personal life when I've been given that kind of, you know, I've been given that space to do what I want to do. And it feels really good to give that space to other people.
Absolutely.
And to let other people kind of, you know, I just like standing back and watching the thing happen, you know, and that it kind of lifts them up and it feels good to myself too, you know.
Absolutely.
So.
Okay. I want to talk about creativity for a minute.
Okay.
Last time I saw you do anything artistic was at Art Hotel when it was above Cranky's. We were part of this crazy show that had a lot of moving pieces to it. I remember a guy with a beatboxer with a cart who just kind of rolled into the room and back out again.
Okay, yeah.
Molly Grace and I were doing our Grace and Nails kind of ghost show. And then you did this thing. And maybe you can just tell me, maybe you can just you can explain what that was.
Yeah, it was Molly and I did it.
That's right. You did. Y'all both did.
We did it. It was like a performance piece. I can't remember the story to it now. I remember what we did, but there was a narrative to the performance. But basically, I wore like a fat suit, and was wearing, and I had my face because it was for Day of the Dead. Was what the event was. It was called Day of Dreamers, and it was I think it was a benefit for DACA, and that's what it was, and so it was kind of based loosely off of the, I guess like Mexican like clowning, and kind of so I was like wearing a fat suit and I had a mask on, but my face was also painted underneath, and Molly and I did some kind of like a pantomime like back and forth. Like a performance piece. Yeah. And there was a narrative to it, but I can't remember it now.
I don't either.
Yeah.
But I do remember just seeing you do that and being like, yeah, it was very impressive to me. that's a type of creativity that I don't know really how to tap into. Like, and we all access creativity probably in different ways or whatever. You and I have known each other as musicians for a long time. Like, I know what that feels like. I know what it feels like to be I know what it feels like to be willing to wear a costume, but to do what you did, to like step into movement and to step into physical storytelling and miming and stuff like that. It was interesting. I don't know. And it made me wonder, like, as I've reflected on it into anticipating you being here, like I was thinking about that and wondering like what your relationship with just freedom within creativity, you know, like how you conceptualize that, what your philosophy is, what your approach is, that kind of thing.
I guess if I have an idea and I have a drive to do something, I just do it. And that, yeah, I mean, I guess that's kind of the simplest way to put it, but I don't know if that's too open-ended. Yeah.
Is there, like, it sounds easy, but how did you, maybe, like, do you know why there's a lot of ways that people who don't have that muscle could talk themselves out of being that free in front of an audience. Is there can you tell me about where that came from for you, or is that something you've always had?
I think it's just something that I might have always had. But I guess it's just like with playing music and stuff, the more you've done it and the more you do it, it kind of just becomes almost like a second nature that you could step up on a stage tonight and, you know, play for an hour or more, you know, and just do it.
Yeah.
And not really have to like think that much about it. And I guess it's just kind of like that. It's just, I've never stopped making art. I've never stopped doing things. I've never stopped. I don't play music all the time, but I always make music, at home. And, so just, I guess it's just like a muscle, really. It's just like if you don't stop working it, then it doesn't become like weak, you know, or you don't stop doing the thing, you don't lose it.
And given that you're involved in so many different kinds of arts, do you find for you that muscle is the same muscle from art form to art form?
I guess it's all kind of like facets of a similar thing. I guess for me, it's like I make digital paintings, and that for me is my core art that I feel like that I make. And now that I've like gotten to the point that I make paintings a lot, and I do it like all the time, and I feel really satisfied with that. And I feel like that's kind of like, for me, that's the art that I want to make. And that's the art form that has felt the closest to myself that I've ever done. And so anything outside of that to me is just kind of like an extra.
Interesting. That is very interesting. What is it about digital paint that makes you like, that feels the most like you?
I think that I can, no matter what kind of like thoughts or emotions I'm feeling, it's a solitary thing, you know, and it's something that like you don't have to go anywhere. You don't have to interact with anyone. It's something that you can just do by yourself and feel satisfied with. It's not performative or anything. Also, I feel like the ideas that I have and the things that I feel, I can get them out the most clearly and the most kind of fully that way. And so to me, it feels like it kind of encapsulates everything that I like want to do, or I like am interested in, or everything really, you know, everything kind of funnels into that.
That's really interesting. So I'll put this on the table, despite trying to do it better than I have in the past. Like, I've been really trying to reflect lately on not expressing resentment toward technology and resentment toward technological tools that we now have.
Sure.
Especially because it in the past has made me feel pathetic. Like, I have felt sometimes like I was in this art world that was more on the side of antique or tradition or something. And that, like, I've had this attitude that's like, oh, the arts are being, they're going to be overrun with technology. Like, we're going to lose the tactile, we're going to lose the in-person stuff the more that things advance. And I've decided recently to stop bitching about such things. Um, and I remember you, I think, were the first person who said to me something like, have you seen, I think it might have been when you were here before for the previous podcast. I think you said to me something like, yeah, these young kids, like, they're doing this other stuff with music. Like, have you heard of Songly? And I was like, no. Was this you that told me about Songly, like, way before?
Musically?
Musically.
Yeah. But what became TikTok?
What became TikTok?
Yeah,
Yes.
right.
You told me about it, and I was like, "That's crazy." And you're like, "Yeah, they do like this really interesting stuff with it." Then flash forward to now TikTok. It sounds like you have been more on, like, you've been aware of what's happening in the digital space with creativity for a while, and it sounds like in a way that it embraces it and makes the most of it.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I don't know. I don't really like put anything down, in many ways. I think that with anything, like, creativity you can use all these things to be creative. And then you can also use all these things to talk you out of being creative, I guess,
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's just like the thing like AI art, which has been, like, really kind of new. Like, I sent you some AI images earlier today.
You sure did. I'll bet. And I have this idea, and we'll see. But I think one of them is going to go right here as the centerpiece.
Oh, right on.
So, anyway.
Yeah. And that's kind of like a funny, like, there's a lot of contention around that in the art world now.
Yes.
Because this computer program can make things that are infinitely, like, weirder and more creative and, like, far out, and, like, things that, like, humans, like, I don't know, maybe can't even make.
Can't even think of sometimes.
Right. Right. And it's like I was showing someone yesterday I was showing them the program, and they were said, let's do, like, a tiger in the jungle, something so simple. But then the way that it rendered the tiger had, like, 6 legs and, like, 2 tails. I mean, it ended up really, like, strange. And,
Yeah.
And so it takes this thing into somewhere that humans can't go, or we can go, but it's, I don't know, it bridges some weird gaps, and then it makes people feel funny. It makes people feel like. And I had another conversation yesterday with a friend, and he said the artists that have, like, have a voice and have found their, like, creative outlet that is sort of, like, authentic to themselves aren't threatened by it at all. Because to me, I think it's like a fun tool. I think it's like something to play with and something to explore, rather than feel sore about it.
Sure. I'm not a visual artist, so I don't know how they feel. I'm not a horrible visual artist, but I can't paint. I can't really draw. I do ink drawings that I get, like, I enjoy, and other people tell me that they like them. And that's fine for me.
Yeah.
I'm not a good painter, and I can come up with words. So and I'm saying this because I have explored the AI art thing, and I can participate in that and play with that tool in a way that generates really fucking cool images. I couldn't do that without it, and I think I like that. I like being able to play with it and generate those images. If I were a painter who had spent a very long time learning how to do that, maybe I would care, because now AI music is such a thing. And for me, what that feels like is not that it encroaches on my voice or my whatever, my space. I don't resent the computer, but to me, what's valuable about music is the aspect of it that is the fact that it's achieved by humans. Like, that's what makes it art in a way. That's what makes it cultural in a way.
Sure.
So I don't know. I guess there's that question that comes up in my mind of, like, if we lose that, what is art anymore? I guess.
Yeah. But also the thing about AI music, it doesn't come anywhere close to what AI visual art.
Oh, really?
Oh, I don't think so.
I haven't heard any of it.
AI music, well, it's all just crunched by data and computers and stuff. And so images are super easy to put things together and like mash up and just, and every time someone types something into an AI, that AI is scanning, the internet essentially for those images. And then it like puts that in its like memory bank essentially. And so it's always like crunching this like data into making better images.
Yeah.
Or making richer images that come from like a wider source. But all the music that I've heard made with AI, it sounds broken and robotic and doesn't have any life to it.
Interesting.
It's not even on par with like electronic music, which can be like broken and artificial sounding and far out.
Right.
And so
Okay.
I don't think music's in any danger.
I'm gonna have to try that out.
Yeah.
I haven't done that.
Yeah.
Have you seen any of the like movie scripts written by AI?
I have, yeah.
They are so funny.
They're really good, yeah.
They're fantastic. It doesn't seem like movies are in any danger either, according to the samples that we have so far.
No, but it does put together some of the most like absurd like phrasings of things and just the way that it, I saw one time that it was like a crust punk lyrics written by an AI. And it was just hilarious, it was all like all these kind of like tropes and things that have come from like those different worlds, and just disparaging the government and like, we hop trains and all this kind of stuff. It's just kind of like taking all this stuff and jumbling it up.
Yeah.
And trying to make some sense out of it.
Which, when you say it that way, is not different than what we've always been doing with art. Like, we as humans jumble this stuff up and kind of regurgitate it. It's not like we're inventing something brand new all the time.
Right.
We're just adjusting a little bit, and it's a little more palatable because it's within the confines of what we already do.
Right.
But you're right about, like, I mean, the art that I've generated, while some of it is absolutely stunning and like makes some sense, some of it's just insane. Some of it's like, so I did one of the house. I used this software that you could use a photograph and you could dictate sort of how much it referred to the photograph or deviated from it. And like it ended up with these things that looks like my house, but all kind of shifted and messed up. And then there's these drawings in the sky where there's supposed to be trees and stuff. Just really bonkers.
Oh yeah.
Weird stuff.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Yeah.
It's beautiful and it's fascinating, and it's like, I mean, I think if anything, if artists are concerned about their footing, anything, it should be more inspiring. If anything, you should see that and be like, oh, that, like, look at the capabilities of this. Like, maybe I can tap deeper into my imagination.
Fair.
Maybe that might help some people think more outside the box or something in terms of, if you feel kind of threatened, like you either like stop or you fight, or you get better, or
That's right.
whatever,
The fight or flight.
Right.
Or die. Exactly. And yeah, like, I mean, like, you would think that we'd be able to experience that. I get it to some degree, I guess, the way that humans might feel about that. But yeah, I mean, when you look at that, it is something that it's hard to imagine it coming from the human imagination sometimes. When you look at somebody like Dolly, then it's like, okay, the human imagination is really capable of a lot.
Sure.
But not everybody practices that level of creativity all the time. I mean, Dali lived a lifestyle that evoked that constantly, but your average person doesn't really evoke that from themselves all the time. So yeah, I mean, I think the way you said it is exactly right. Like, these images, we could just look at them as little teachable moments for us to like challenge our own vision,
Oh yeah. I use a lot of the AI art that I produce in like flyers now, or like kind of like where you would maybe grab some clip art or something, or some kind of like try to formulate some kind of image that's maybe like a vehicle for like, giving some information, like this flyer, I need to put some images on it, or, use this kind of thing as a promotional image. You can just like mock up anything in an AI program, and it's, there's no IP or anything. You don't have to pay rights or tag anyone, and you just kind of can make your own background art in some kind of way. And so it's like I think it's a cool tool, you know.
Absolutely.
But and I guess like also like coming from, I've always loved like techno music, like electronic music. Like even since like, even when I was playing in like jazz groups or punk bands or whatever, I think that kind of like weird kind of like underground like acid techno has always been really my like favorite type of music. And so I guess technology has never really like scared me or pushed me away in any kind of way.
Yeah.
Just because the music I love is all made on computers or weird machines and, you know, programs for computers that weren't even intended to make music.
Right.
You know, that these people in the 90s were, you know, rewriting programs and making weird stuff out of it, you know, so.
Yeah. Yeah, I had a different relationship with technology all the while, but I see that. I see what you mean. And I think that also shows itself in probably the music I make and the music you make and come from. So let's talk about this for a quick minute. When I met you, you were around with Dylan V, and there was another guy, Elijah, back then.
Okay, yeah.
You guys all exposed me to a type of approach to music that it was beyond what I had discovered on my own. I remember Elijah at the time was something else, but he had this telephone that he had wired into a amplifier, and at the open mic he would start his set with that, and it would be so loud, and I couldn't do anything about it, and it would push, like everybody would leave the coffee shop to where it was like only 3 people left, and then he would unplug it and like do a normal set.
Sure.
It was so bizarre. And then of course there was Dylan V, who me and Matt Albedo just still remember as this visionary person, somebody who just, I don't know, his use of typewriters, his use of like noises in his recordings, the way he sang, the way he wrote, just a very unique, memorable artist. How did you and Dylan find each other?
I guess it was through the music scene, but I'm trying to remember how we actually met. Maybe it was through, did you know a guy named Trevor? I think it's Trevor Reese.
I did know Trevor Reese sometime.
Because he was around King, because he grew up in King, and he was the same age as Dylan. And Trevor was into like mod kind of music and like punk and stuff. He was in a punk band, I think, early on. And then him and Dylan were friends, and I think we met through that. Because Trevor was friends with Savannah, who was in my group. They were all, him and Dylan and Savannah and Trevor were all the same age. And so Dylan was just kind of in that mix. And then got to hanging out with Dylan, and, you know, kind of, he was like 14 and he'd already recorded like 8 records of his own music and stuff. You know, it was really like in that early, like his teen years, he was very prolific and very like, almost kind of like accidentally avant-garde.
Yeah.
You know, like kind of, he just said one of those things where, you know, some people just the way that they kind of come to things and make things and do things, it's already just kind of backwards and unique and without even being contrived.
Right.
You know, and that was kind of the magic of him, is that he was, you know, and you talk to him and he was already into some like kind of like outsider folk music like Jandek or something, and you know, he was already kind of like tapped into that in some kind of way, so he knew about it. He wasn't oblivious to it, but yeah, it was just kind of really, he was really sweet and really beautiful, and you know, and just made a bunch of music, you know, and wrote some of the lyrics and stuff, you know, because when he passed, you know, I listened to a bunch of his stuff for a while. Yeah. You know, and really, you know, got into it, and you know, it's just really just, I don't know, it was something special. It was something special that he was doing, and I think maybe in some ways he was as he was his own worst enemy. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
In some ways, I think that I don't know, you know?
He lived some hard moments for sure,
Yeah.
and he had some struggles.
Yeah.
But yeah, he was. I mean, I have a collection of his CDs downstairs, and when he passed, Matt came over and we tried working on some of the songs. We were gonna like try to put out some. We are gonna put out one Dylan V tribute song, you know, and we got into it, and it was kind of hard to do it. It was kind of like it felt maybe like the not the way we wanted to honor Dylan at that moment or something like that, but we did. We spent some time with those songs, and it was just like, God, like we just sat there in frustration. Like he was so good, and his lyrics are so good. And it's, you know, it's one of those things that's sad for someone like Dylan to, I don't know. It's like I could have seen Dylan reaching a very interesting artist in the, which as you were talking, reminds me of when Tom Waits, there's a story of Tom Waits being, winning a Grammy or something in an alternative category, and he, after he was acknowledged, he just apparently like went backstage and was like, alternative to what? That was his thing. He was like, what? Why am I so different or whatever? And that reminds me of Dylan too. Just kind of like, sure, I'm me, but what? Like, so are you?
Right.
kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, something special about him. And then when we met, that's right when I had moved back to.
Oh, really?
Right when I had moved back to North Carolina. Maybe that was between Denver and Portland. It might have even been. I might have just been back for a while then.
Yeah.
And I was playing drums with Dylan.
Yeah.
And it was just him playing guitar and me playing drums.
That's right.
And helped him record some stuff, and yeah, so that was during that was that time.
I wonder if you're on some of these recordings, because I think there's some drums on some of the.
I'm the only recording that I'm on is the one with the collaged cover of, like, it's a bunch of quilts and a bunch of snare drums.
The blue one?
It might be blue.
Is it? I wonder if it's blue.
It might be. I can't remember the name of it now.
He also had a moniker, Wild Blue Yonder.
Wild Blue Yonder,
for a
yeah.
while. Which is it's still just, I mean, it wasn't drastically different, right? It was still just Dylan.
It's still the same stuff, but I don't know why he decided those records were going to be Wild Blue Yonder and not Dylan V. Or
yeah, cool name though.
Yeah, oh for sure. He had it painted on his bass drum of his drum set, Wild Blue Yonder. But yeah, I really, and during that period of time, I hung out with Dylan all the time.
Yeah.
You know, we were just together all the time, just making music and stuff. And he ended up playing with another group that I was playing with at that time.
Oh yeah.
He played like second guitar in that group, and but yeah, that was really a fun time, and I'm glad I got to hang out with him steady for like a year or something during those years. You
might not know this, but Dylan and I were in like 5th grade together.
Okay.
And so that's when I met him. And it's funny because when we were both in 5th grade, we were both really into like rocket power and like X Games type of sports.
Yeah.
We were both into rollerblading and stuff, but Dylan's sort of archetype, I guess, was of the surfer. He was like really into surfing, though he had never been surfing before or something. And he had this flowing like cowlick blonde hair. And I have this picture I took of Dylan where we were walking around, and it was on our class field trip to Washington D.C. and we were walking down the street, and I was like, Dylan, and he turned around, and I took a picture of him, and I just have that picture. I think that's right, or it could have been on a bus, but I think it was walking. And I remember, and that was a rare thing because Dylan was so obsessed with his hair. He always had a comb on him, and he always was like, I got to make my hair look all good.
That's fantastic.
Then after 6th grade, I didn't see him for like, until we were both in our early 20s or late teens or something. He probably came to the open mic in King, and then it was just like, oh shit, it's Dylan, and we reconnected, and he remembered me, I think, and yeah. crazy just how, and Matt and I had similar stories. Just kind of, we met in school at a very young age, and then found ourselves as musicians, kind of around the same time as all that.
That's really cool.
All ended up in music.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So Dylan V.
Oh yeah. I love it. I love old Dylan.
Yep. Good guy. So I guess it's like your bio.
Sure.
It's technology as we think of it.
Yeah.
It's Dylan V. And that's what you've got going on in Winston so far.
Right.
What is happening, I guess, currently or next at the gallery space?
We have a 2-day holiday market coming up, and it's with Tess from the Art Hotel, or Tessa. They did the Cranky's Art Mart when it was at Cranky's, and then it was upstairs one year, and then now they're at their new location at the West Salem Art Hotel. And so I was talking about doing like a vendor kind of art market for the holidays, and they've always done it. So I got together with Tessa, and we're planning it out.
Nice.
So that's the 9th and the 10th of December. It's a Friday and Saturday, Friday night and Saturday lunchtime kind of thing. Got some live music, a jazz group coming through, and some food, and we're gonna have like 30 artists and people that make things all like up in our space.
Well, that's badass.
Yeah, and so kind of continuing that kind of holiday market thing that's been, kind of in the works with the people that we've known for years now, and kind of just continuing that and giving it a venue and a big space to work in. So excited about that,
Yeah.
It's going to be good.
Do you find that, do you still live out of Winston?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I live in Germantown.
Yeah. And obviously I'm up here in Rural Hall.
Yeah, for sure.
We both kind of capitalize on Winston, but
Yeah.
live out in the woods somewhere.
For sure.
Do you ever find that what is your impression, I guess, of do you I wish sometimes that there were more ways for me to connect within the community the way that I do downtown, or the way that I used to downtown within the arts. Outside of I wish there was more stuff up in our neck of the woods. You ever think about that?
Not really.
No? You're happy to just
go
there to do your work?
Yeah. I guess I kind of because where I grew up in Virginia, we lived out in the country, but we were pretty close to some cities. We could be in the city in an hour or so. To Roanoke, was our big city, and then living down here in King, it kind of felt the same way. Like I live outside the city, but the city's so close. And then now, especially I wouldn't want to live in any city. I like living out in the country.
Yeah.
I like the space, and I like the pace, and I like seeing a lot of trees. But the beautiful thing about it is we can be in the city, and it takes me 25 minutes to be downtown.
Yeah.
And it's all back roads, so it doesn't feel like any kind of commute or anything. It's just I like that though. I like having a place to go that feels familiar and like a recharging kind of place, and just you can just step out on your porch and you don't see anyone, and you don't have any kind of rules, or you know what I mean. You just you're it's a lot more freedom, I think, in the country, especially for myself.
Oh yeah.
And it's where what feels home to me. But then also in a setting like this, or out in the country, there's not a lot going on culturally or culture-wise, you know what I mean? There's not a lot that you can tap into all the time, but the city's so close.
Yeah.
And so it's just kind of using what you have.
I relate to all of that for sure.
Mm-hmm.
I love the space. I love the distance. I even like the distance. I like having to drive 15 or 20 minutes to town instead of it being right out my door. But I guess it's just when I look around King and Rural Hall, and Germantown doesn't even have Germantown didn't have the railroad or whatever. So it's just on its own. It's just almost all other than 2 stores. It's it's almost all residential.
Yeah, we don't even have a stoplight.
Yeah, you don't, do you?
No, we have
Yeah.
like 2 gas stations, a Dollar General.
And you get that little that I guess like it might is it a general store now on the right?
It's the Daily Basket. It's
Uh-huh.
like it's like a general store. They have a deli now. Actually, they put in a restaurant and a really sweet like back patio. They're gonna start having some music and stuff out there.
Really?
And it's some. They actually a guy named Miles runs it. He went to school with my wife. He's like our age. Super super cool guy, and
That's cool.
yeah. So they're kind of bringing that. Yeah, it kind of feels like something that would be kind of in Winston, young and
Yeah.
fresh and.
See, that's what I'm talking about. That's what I'm talking about. It's not so much the I don't want skyscrapers to come to Rule Hall, but I want it. I like the idea of more youth. I like the idea of more people our age kind of trying to do things and be entrepreneurs in these small towns because there's so much charm. Like I feel like downtown people especially don't. They might drive through Rule Hall to go to Hanging Rock, but they don't know what the hell Germantown has. Like they don't know about Horizon Park. They don't know about like the place to buy the Bigfoot statue if you want one or
Sure.
whatever. Like
Yeah.
there's weird shit in Walnut Cove and Rule Hall
Oh, yeah.
and Germantown that's like kind of it's an interesting culture out here. And I guess sometimes I just wish like more people our age were able to express that culture entrepreneurially or artistically just within our own communities,
Do you think if we had a hub or we had somewhere like out here that would gravitate people to it, that's not a coffee shop or a general store things can happen at coffee shops. And I know there's in King at was it Fanny and Ira's? Have you heard of that place? They have music there.
Yeah.
They have stuff going on. I know some people that have played out there.
What kind of music?
Well, the guy that I know, he just country music.
That's what I want. Yeah.
Yeah, or kind of country Americana.
Americana could be good.
Yeah.
I know that they have karaoke out there sometimes, and that's bound to be fun. I've been present for one of those evenings. Yeah, I think King. I think all these areas same as back when we were playing up there. Like the people, there are certain people in this area that are still. If they were going to see live music, they would expect it to be like play some Leonard Skinner type of thing, and so. I would love it if it was more obvious that artists trying to do original things in all art forms had the audience for it. And I think if we, to answer your question, a hub, a space, something that facilitated the gathering of that right audience instead of just the generic rural audience. I think if we could target the more youthful audience in these little towns, I think it would probably be a good idea. I think it could do something.
Yeah, but I wonder where those people are in King. Like, are there any like 20-year-olds in King? Because it feels like that, or in these areas, because it feels like that when kids get out of high school, they leave. And most of the people that are there are people our age that have settled down and had families.
Right.
And so all the college age people are gone. It's seemingly to me.
Yeah, potentially, and
Or
I
they
hate
don't
to
hang
be so generic about it, but
Yeah.
not to mention those who do stay, they might stay in King because it matches the culture that they want to continue to participate in, rather than something like moving to Winston. Like maybe it is the obvious case that the people who want a more like artistic environment move to Winston or somewhere bigger, and the people who want country living and they want to like listen to Luke Bryan, maybe they stay in King.
Sure. Yeah.
Maybe.
I just don't think that those areas are really. I guess if you want more, you leave, and not a lot of people stay and want more. You know what I mean? But
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of, to me, I guess I'm kind of happy it being, backwards some kind of, or not, it's not even backwards. It's just kind of like, I don't know. It's almost like a time capsule in some kind of way, or some kind of like a separate thing.
And it's like a neutral existence. It's like it ain't doing nothing. It's just sitting there. That's how it feels sometimes.
Or just a recursion of this, you know. I think a lot of the people that are our age that have stayed, they just become their parents, or like a iteration of that, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's fine. I mean, it makes them happy, but it's yeah.
Yeah, it's all fine, but
it's like what could you do out here that would draw that kind of crowd out of the city to come, you know, 20 minutes out to the, you know, I mean, like if you had like a music festival out here in your front yard. I mean, you know what I mean? That might would be something that.
Weird you say that.
Yeah.
That's kind of in the works.
Yeah. I mean, that to me is what would be the thing I think that would bring people out, and then they would like the environment and say, I want to come back again.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
I guess, so frankly, I think part of the reason these ideas are on the forefront of my mind is because these are exactly the conversations I've been having with people about how we can create things within this area that would actually be useful. Maybe not drawing people from Winston, because that might be a harder sell, but there's a lot of people in Pofftown and Bethania and Rural Hall, Germantown, King, Pilot Mountain, if you want to go that far, Pinnacle, Louisville. Like, there's a lot of people in sort of the non-Winston town, like the northern or western or whatever side of Winston. And I'm thinking maybe there are opportunities to, like, I mean, like there's spaces in these towns, kind of like that general store or like the coffee shop in Winston, in Louisville. There's places in these old towns, and I want to think about what that could mean. Additionally, I definitely do think that there should be a music festival, like a serious music festival, that is separate from Winston, that takes place on the northern side of the area, that hopefully would draw people into some of these more depressed economies, because like music festivals are very useful for that. They can create huge economic impacts for towns that otherwise don't have a ton to offer, you know.
Oh, for sure.
Can't sustain people year long, but they might be able to sustain people through a big ass festival.
And at least show a great group of people that, I mean, that you're making something happen. You know, you're making something happen in this, like, because we have a lot of room out here in the country. There's a whole lot of room to do stuff. We're not crowded. But I think kind of giving an environment to make, you know, give it to the artists and give it to the musicians to
100%.
kind of, I mean, because it'd be a beautiful thing to have a field full of people and giving them some music that, you know, is a tier above like a cover group at a coffee shop.
Yeah,
you know?
exactly.
Well,
that Cranky story is part of what inspires me so much. I realized that was an urban environment and that it was different, you know, and it was a different time period. But like, when you do leave it to artists, when artists seek out those opportunities to disrupt things in that way and utilize spaces, interesting things do tend to happen, and they tend to be a huge part of what revitalizes, you know, depressed cities or economically sort of impoverished areas or different shit like that. I think the same thing I think it's just an interesting thought to reverse the role and to, instead of expecting to see that strictly in urban environments, to try to just like embody that same spirit in some of these rural environments. Tell the artists to inhabit some of those spaces and see what they come up with.
Oh, for sure.
I think that'd just be so inspiring.
I think so too. And it has potential to definitely like inspire more people and snowball. You know, like somebody that's in the area that might be inspired to take part next time, you know, or get involved in any kind of way.
Yeah.
Then you're just building your community and all that kind of stuff around something special, you know, something that has happened out in the country, which is cool.
I wouldn't, in my life, in my time knowing you, I wouldn't have necessarily taken you for a guy who wanted to be out in the country. It's a little surprising.
Yeah. I just love it.
Yeah.
That's how I grew up, you know.
And you said in Virginia, about an hour outside of Roanoke?
Yeah, just about. Just near Martinsville in a place called Ridgeway, which is like an outlier of Martinsville.
Is Martinsville north of Roanoke?
south.
South of Roanoke.
It's only about an hour and a half from here, Martinsville is.
Okay.
I just go up 220.
Okay.
That's where the speedway, the NASCAR speedway's there.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I was just up there. I had to I went out to Kentucky to do a show out there, and I had to go through Roanoke or whatever. And anyway, I love Virginia, man.
Yeah, I do too.
It's like it feels like home away from home. It doesn't. It feels like more mountainous up and down North Carolina to me, pretty much. But the culture feels very similar, more so than even like North and South Carolina.
Yeah, I would think so too.
Yeah,
I think so too. I like when you get up through Virginia and the hills start getting really dramatic and rolling, and it's just really beautiful. I like that drive from North Carolina to Kentucky out that way, like going through those. Then when you get into West Virginia,
oh my god,
it's so craggy and and then Kentucky, you get back into the rolling hills and just the beautiful landscapes, and
it's so beautiful. And such a subtle difference in it's a subtle difference in altitude, I guess. But like when I went up there just a week ago, I think, when I got up to West Virginia, everything was covered in this really thin sheet of snow. And then Kentucky, there was kind of a thin sheet of snow. And then I got down the mountain, like kind of down into the hills, got into Lexington, and Lexington hadn't had snow, but then that night started snowing while I was out there.
Wow.
And it was just so pretty. Have you spent much time in Lexington?
Kentucky?
Yeah. Man, I've been like, a guy I work with is from there, and he never, he made it sound like it was so unimportant, I guess. But as soon as I rolled in, it was like, it was this weird other version of Winston. Like, all these big-ass square houses from the 1700s were all bunched up against each other. And they were like right up against this big ass university, and that was right up against downtown. Like, it was all just too familiar. It was like, wow, this is Lexington feels like a slightly different Winston-Salem. And instead of like Moravian stuff, they got horse statues everywhere.
Yeah.
But it was a cool place.
I've only ever driven through Kentucky. I think we might have stopped in one town. I can't remember now. But yeah.
Yeah, man, when I get up in West Virginia and in Virginia, sometimes I'm just like, God, I should just live up here. Like, there's just something so, I don't know what it is. Something so, I don't know, hypnotizing about it, about driving around those mountains.
Yeah, I think like you said, it feels familiar, but also it's like you've never been there or never seen any of it. So it's like, it feels very familiar, but it's also like very different.
Yeah.
From
Weird
what
mix.
it is here.
Yeah. You ever think, have you ever been tempted to go back to Virginia?
No, not really.
Well, you like it here pretty good?
Yeah, I do. Well, I've got, we built a house in 2012 and we've got land, and I'm not going to really go anywhere.
Yeah.
I do. There's this one building in Martinsville that I'd love to just own, because it was built it's like right downtown Martinsville. It was built in the 60s, and it's a really weird, like mod kind of building. It's like all like square and glass, and it's like orange panels and stuff. It looks really out of place in downtown, but it looks very futuristic. I don't know. I'd like to have that as my like second home or something. I think that'd be fun.
Yeah.
Like I'm going to Martinsville and living in this this weird thing, and kind of turn that into like some kind of a exterior art studio or something. But
yeah.
that's
or
a dream.
Art
right?
Airbnb.
Sure.
Art B&B. Something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be fun, man. Owning, it'd be fun just to own to be able to have different different homes in different places.
I've just, even as a kid growing up there, that building was always just so just out of place and kind of like strange, and it's, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's very out of place in that city, because everything was probably built in the 30s, 40s. And then that one was some futuristic looking 60s building on the end of a street. It's fascinating, but.
You do any country shit out there in Germantown?
What do you mean?
Like, you hunt possums, or
no,
you ever go to the turkey shoot or anything?
No, I mean, I have to chop down trees or cut down trees every once in a while that fall, and
Yeah.
I mean, I love doing that kind of stuff. We've got some fields that we mow and take care of, and we've got some apple trees and some grapevines, and
Oh, that's fun.
yeah, our grapevines really took off this past maybe 3 years or something like that.
Yeah?
Because we've had them for 10 years growing
Huh.
up on the side of a barn. And then the past 3 years, we've gotten a ton of grapes. We made 22 jars of jam this year.
Really?
Yeah, from our grapes. And that's just the best way to work them, and, we eat as many as we can, and then we've just got to do something with all these grapes.
Yeah. Are you into like the homestead type thing? Like, do you do you want to do more living off the land type shit?
Yeah, probably like maybe when like my daughter gets older, I think like incorporating that into some of because now with like work with the project downtown, and with like when I'm at home, I just want to work on my own personal art,
Yeah.
and be with my family, and I don't have a lot of spare time to do a bunch of
Yep.
that kind of stuff. And with my daughter being 3 now, it's kind of, it's like, I think when she gets older, things like that, we'll probably have some chickens, and we'll probably do more growing and things like that when we have the time to, and can kind of teach her those kinds of things and let her be a part of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's bad. I didn't
Yeah.
actually know you had a daughter.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
fun.
Marigold.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah.
What's that been like? Has that been a thing to adjust to?
I guess maybe not really, because I'm pretty like spontaneous, and just like kind of rolling with whatever happens, and so it's a lot of fun. I
Yeah.
really enjoyed it. I really, and I still enjoy it, and yeah, it's been really beautiful. It's been really cool.
I would think Germantown would be a good place for a family like that. Like,
Oh, for sure.
like, yeah, if I had kids, that would reinforce me wanting to live somewhere, out here.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, and it's just kind of like well, I'm gonna live there regardless, But then also thinking about her having a similar kind of, space to live in that I did. Because where we lived in Virginia, we had some land that backed up to this other guy's farm. It was like 300 acres, and we just could, ride our dirt bikes and stuff like on his, out in his fields all the time, and so we never felt like limited for recreation and space and all that kind of stuff. And
Yeah.
But just like knowing that she'll grow up that way too, is kind of fun and beautiful, and yeah, I like it.
Yeah, I love that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I see myself. I've been it feels like I've been putting it off for a long time. Maybe just because my brain is usually in this other space with art and stuff, with thinking about what to do there. But yeah, I love the idea of trying to do more living off of land, and having a bigger garden, and having grapevines, and having apple trees, and all that good stuff. It seems like that's one of the great parts of living out, where you actually have room to do stuff like that, is to utilize the land, and do the old school thing with it.
Oh, for sure. I mean, in some things like that, like our apple trees and grapevines and stuff, I really don't tend them very much. We'll just let them do their thing, and just kind of let them go and enjoy it that way. And we've got the space, just let it happen.
Yeah.
But yeah, I love it. I love living in the country.
Yeah, that's kind of the essence right there. Is if you have the space to just let it happen. You have the space to let nature happen, which is, that's a different attitude than if you lived on a block in Winston, or like in Ardmore or somewhere. It's like nature's like one big pin oak tree that like that's on the edge of your yard, but that's like if it interferes with your neighbor's tree, then you have to cut it or whatever. Like, you have to be very careful about letting nature really happen, or whatever.
Do you know Laura Lashley, the artist?
That name has come up twice in my life recently.
Okay.
How do I know that name?
She's a painter. She was part of the Warehouse gang from way back. You've seen her murals. She does a lot of murals in Winston. On the corner of where the Benton Convention and the Small Batch.
Been there an awful lot.
That mandala with the birds flying into it. That's one of her pieces.
Okay.
But she lives on South Side, I think maybe Devonshire or Sprague, down in that area. And her yard is the most beautiful, like she lets it go wild.
Really?
And lots of exotic like flowers and stuff, and just, I mean, it looks like a jungle, but but it's all like curated and just lots of big bushes and lots of big flowers, and it just goes wild.
Someone told me that someone said I ran into somebody at Public House, and they were like, we were talking about exactly that, and she was like, yeah, I am, she said, like, I'm scared of nature, so I just kind of, in my yard, I leave her alone. I just like let her do what she's gonna do because I don't want to piss her off or something. And I'm like, that's interesting.
Yeah.
So yes, I get it. In out here, the same way that you talked about having to cut up trees when you need to, not only do you have the privilege to let nature happen, but you also have to have, it seems, in a way, this actual sense of participation and authority with nature. Like you have to, when it gets out of hand, you actually have to do something about it. And that's not unlike what the level of containment that some people might have in an urban environment. But the level of containment is almost like you don't let it happen. You just don't. You just like contain it, period. And then you've got some people who approach it like that, who just kind of like say fuck it and let it run wild. Which is obviously a rarity, I guess. But out here, yeah, I mean, I cut my shin open once, and we had to go to the doctor and get stitches and stuff. And he was like, "What were you doing?" And I was like, "You running a chainsaw?" And he was like, "Why on earth were you running a chainsaw?" And I was like, because I live around trees. What are you talking about?
Yeah, right.
Sometimes you gotta cut shit with a chainsaw.
I gotta get a hold of a bush hog.
Yeah,
we've got along our driveways. You know, we've got a bunch of brush growing up now, so that's my next country living thing to tackle. Is like, I need to get a bush hogger to get up on my brush, but you know, it's just part of the thing, man. It's good.
One thing at a time.
Oh yeah. I guess like curation of things, like curating your yard.
Absolutely.
In a way. I really am just of the philosophy that I just like to let it do its thing.
Yeah.
And let nature be nature, and, you know, have fun in it.
I have done that a lot. And I don't know what happened, but so like for a long time, that was sort of my philosophy, was like, just be an observer. Not like this thing, but I don't know, man, this other sense in me, this sense of like, imposing your will, like imposing your will on the world, or the life that you have. Somehow I've been cultivating that over the years, and the more that I do it, the more it's sort of like it reaches into every aspect of my life, including something like that. Like I built this barn out here, you know, and I look around at the trees and I think, you know, those trees are all growing into each other, and half of them are dead, and they're all falling apart. Like, it would be best. It would be like the big ass oak tree would probably appreciate it more if it just had room to do its thing without all these old ass pine trees like falling into it all the time. You know, so I'm looking at things like that, just thinking I can actually maximize the well-being of these woods in a way, and not just strictly observe them. And so that's been born in my mind. It's not the right way to live in the woods. It's just like, I've just noticed that kind of.
I think it might actually be the right way to live in the woods. I mean, if you think about like old school homesteading or Western expansion or whatever, you know, how capable people are of shaping their environment, you know, and changing it and making it better. And, you know, if you're a farmer and enriching your soil and, you know, shifting your crops to, you know, help that. And that's kind of some like real material science that, you know, you could figure out, and then it's only going to make your personality and like your sense of like where you fit in your environment stronger.
True.
You know, by knowing how to shape it and knowing what to do to make it better or make it, you know.
You know, I just, a thought just dawned on me. Did you ever see The Biggest Little Farm? So there's this, so there's these farms where they basically just create a natural food chain to sustain this farm, and that's what they do. And as we've been talking about this, I thought of that movie for a long time as like, oh, that's how farms should be, because the whole thing was like, the more that the more simplistically these people tried to impose their wishes on this land, you know, a new problem would arise, and they had to get it to where it worked circularly. For example, they would plant something, and then like snails would show up, and then they'd be like, well, how do we deal with the snails? But then they would realize, well, if we put the ducks here, that helps deal with the snails, and that helps feed this, and that helps feed this. But so they make it sound like, oh, if you just like let your farm be natural, nature will do its thing. But what they failed to point out, I guess, was when they got there, that farm had been left there naturally. Like, it was left to nature. It had been depleted of its natural resources or whatever. It was probably unhealthy land, but you know, yet nature can be destructive as well as sustaining. Like, nature can kill shit off. You know, kudzu is nature. Kudzu can ruin a fucking patch of woods.
Sure.
It can kill every tree in a piece of patch of woods. So I don't know. I guess point being, not every way, as we've kind of hinted at in this little portion of the conversation, not every way that humans interact with nature is this like unnatural thing. Like, sometimes it is, like a naturally beneficial way to participate and engage with your environment.
For sure.
Yeah,
For sure.
so anyway, that's what I'm trying to learn how to do more of out here, because otherwise I usually have just kind of, I have a lot of dead trees around here that I need to figure out how to get them out of the air so they don't fall on someone's skull. You know?
Oh man, me too. You know, it's just a never ending thing if you've got a bunch of trees.
How much land are you on?
We have 30 acres.
Woo!
Yeah.
Really? Damn.
Yeah.
That's some good shit.
Oh yeah. And we've got like I guess like forest status or whatever. We have like, I think we only have maybe 2 acres that aren't woods.
Wow.
And so the rest of it's just trees. And then like over the valley from us is like our biggest patch of woods. It's like all old growth, like really, really big trees.
Oh.
And then where our house is, so we have like really like where we live is like kind of like an island in between these like roads. It's like, 65, where like Germantown Park is?
Yeah.
I live just right up the hill from that, essentially.
Okay.
And so our little island is cut with creeks. We have like 3 creeks that go down through our land. And so where we have our house built is kind of on like a little hill, and a creek goes down one side and a creek goes down the other side that splits our land. And so then up on the other hill is where the old growth is. And it's just a bunch of big trees and a bunch of open kind of forest. And then our forest, where our house is really thick. And so it's like got a lot of younger growth and a whole lot of poplars, a whole lot of really like poplar thickets all throughout our land. But I have been doing some like going into the creeks and stuff a lot. Found a whole lot of petrified wood, which is like really exciting. Found some really big pieces of petrified wood in our creeks.
Really?
It's really fascinating. It's really awesome.
Ugh.
But
yeah, those old growth forests, man. They like my shit out here is all got, in the summer it's just the poison ivy blends in with poplar and with cedar and with all these little young growth things. And then a friend of ours, like here on the farm up the road, we go to his place, and there's some kind of divide on 2 sides of a ridge. And on one side it's got young growth on it, and then on the other side it's just pure, like nothing but trees, like this clean ground where nothing is growing, and all these gigantic poplar and oak trees. And
that sounds exactly like what
beautiful.
I have.
That sounds heavenly.
Oh yeah.
You spend a lot of time out there when you can.
Oh yeah. Yeah, we go walk in the woods all the time and just try to spend as much time outside, as we can, and just enjoying it. And
you know which creeks are run by there?
It's they're like tributary, or like they all go into Buffalo Creek, which is like runs down through Germantown.
Okay.
And so these are just kind of little creeks that run into the big Buffalo Creek.
Gotcha.
Which goes down through the town. Yeah.
We have Muddy Creek over here.
Yeah.
So I was wondering if we might be creek neighbors.
Maybe so.
You could maybe send us a ship down there.
Yeah,
down the creek to me.
maybe so.
Send a paper boat.
Mm-hmm. I don't know where I go. I guess they all end up in the ocean. Do they all go to the Yadkin? Is that it?
I think so.
They all end up in the Yadkin probably around here.
Muddy Creek definitely does.
We might too.
Yeah.
I don't quite know, but I'll look into it.
I would.
I'm gonna find out.
I would suspect so.
Yeah, I think so.
I think Yadkin is like, what is it, like 70% of Winston-Salem drinking water?
Or the Dan.
Yeah,
They
maybe.
might-
Yeah,
Yeah, I don't know.
the Yadkin is some high number, but the Dan must have something to do with something. It's a pretty significant river, and the air rat.
I have some research to do now because I want to find out where our creeks go, where Buffalo Creek goes, because that's fascinating.
Man, if my neighbor was here, I bet he'd be able to tell us.
Yeah.
Man, okay. I forgot we were on a podcast.
No, I was like, yeah, no, it's fine. Right?
I was just having fun talking.
Yeah.
Is there anything else we should mention?
Yeah, I did want to, I guess, talk about, we said things coming up.
Yeah.
Just had last week a rap show.
Right.
That I was the booker and promoter for at DeLurk, with a group called Steady Hyperactive from Winston. They're like a rap hip hop collective in the city, and they did that show with some other artists from the city too. And I was actually thinking about it earlier today, like how I got into that scene, and I traced it back to the Day of the Dead performance that we did.
Oh, really?
Because it was up at the warehouse, and the group Mama. Do you remember that group with
Laura?
Yeah, and John Polo, his girlfriend, or he was like their manager or something, or like trying to, I don't know, but they played, and then there was the rapper OG Spliff. His name's Cliff. He came to that show, and I ended up talking to him that night. And I was like, what do you do? And he's like, I make rap music. I'm part of this like collective. And I was like, oh, that's really interesting, because pretty much, I guess, after I moved back to Winston or back to the area, there wasn't the same kind of like youth movement that we had, when we were in our 20s, I guess.
Yeah.
I didn't see any of that happening, especially not with like the rock bands, or definitely not any kind of weirdo music, avant-garde kind of stuff happening. And that's still really not around that much outside of the people who have always done it, that take up residence at Monstercade now.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the home for the, fringe kind of music. And but yeah, met Cliff, and then started talking to him, and then he was like, yeah, we've got this big collective of artists we're all making rap music. We produce our own music. We make our music videos and all this kind of stuff. So I got to talking to him, and then ended up just like hanging out with a bunch of them and making music with them, and then booking shows with them, and just kind of took off from there. And still, we've got a show coming up at the Gas Hill on the 29th of December.
Cool.
That's our next event.
Okay.
And so we've got, I was at my building one day, and there was a group of, I could look down on our parking deck, and I could tell someone was shooting a music video on top of our parking deck, and it was like a rap group. And so I was like, I'm gonna walk down there and talk to them, and so they were a group called the Dead Presidents. It's like I think it's 3 or 4 of them. And they're like, hey man, we're new to Winston from Philadelphia. And I was like, well, I actually booked some shows with rappers. And so we set it up at the Ramcat, and then got some of the Steady Hyperactive guys on that too.
Hell yeah.
So it's really just, to me, it kind of invigorated something in me that with seeing like these 20-year-old people doing something themselves, like truly DIY, and truly like they make everything.
Yeah.
And there's some really awesome like photographers and videographers and musicians and performers, and all in this just kind of like DIY music that is, I guess, kind of like what we weren't ever classically trained. I don't know very many people that hung around the warehouse that were. I mean, some of them went to art school, and some went to things like that, but the majority of the scene was mostly like uneducated, I guess, or unformally educated musicians and artists that were being resourceful and coming up with a scene themselves and kind of shaping their own identity out of just making things happen. And so meeting these people, it felt really like refreshing to me.
Yeah.
And really just like, and the more artists I meet, I mean, there are probably 50 rappers in Winston easily. I mean, it's just, I meet new ones every day, really. And, at every show, new artists.
Yeah.
And so it's really just, it's really cool, and seeing them. So then I started working with them, and what was it? I think it was like November of 2017 is when that Day of the Dead was.
Yeah, probably.
I think I was trying to think about when. I think it was November of 2017 when we did that. And then from there, just been working with them and doing that kind of stuff. And then, I mean, they've taken off. They do at Sika every year. It's the Juneteenth. They have the Juneteenth concert that the Steady Hyperactive guys do.
Oh, cool.
Through out there in the back patio of Sika. And that's a pretty big event. They've been doing it. I think this was the third year this past year. Second or third. And
that's
some
badass.
And some of them have really there's a photographer that named Basha Novart. He's an amazing artist, but he's gone on to shoot photos for Adidas. And he works for Goodwill. He does a bunch of photo shoots with Goodwill Industries and kind of stuff. And just coming from, I mean, I think he's only been shooting photos for 2 years or something, and just kind of the resourcefulness and the imagination and the creativity that's coming out of that scene is really, really cool. And I try to just stay out of their way, but, open as many doors and make it happen as much as I can to just give them a platform to do what they do. And, feels really
that's
good.
Badass.
Mm-hmm.
That's very cool.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like it might be a figment of my imagination, but yeah, I mean, we came up and it seemed as though part of our reality was when you're in your 20s, you play your town and you go out from there.
Mm-hmm.
It feels to me sometimes like the demographic below mine, some people younger than me, they kind of were meh, you don't really do that. And I don't know if it was because of social media or how it worked, but it was no, you just start working in the industry or whatever. You go to Nashville, or you try to get on this thing, or you try to whatever. They game differently. And it's not always as location oriented or something. So anyway, hearing that these guys this is the first I've heard in a while of any younger kids doing anything in Winston that is representative of the arts scene or whatever, the arts community, a community of creative people in Winston. That shit doesn't happen lately anymore.
I didn't think so either.
Yeah.
And that was kind of the revelation, and I was I just want to, not necessarily be a part of it, but do all that I can to, help it, or, just kind of build that with them, or, help them out. And then the more you kind of talk to some artists, we had a lot of conversations, we want to play shows, we want to do these things, but it's kind of I think we might have come up in a time where the DIY thing was ingrained in the culture of the indie rock or punk or folk music or whatever you were into. It's kind of, I think it was kind of prescribed with the music to just, you can do it yourself, and once you do it, you kind of understand, it demystifies it, I think. You're just putting on a show is really not that hard. You got to make sure the sound's good, get the venue, and then just, cross your fingers, hope people show up and hope people perform well.
Yeah.
But the mechanics of it are, and I guess maybe it coming from doing it for so long, or knowing how to do it, it seems fairly easy.
Yeah.
Or can be.
Demystifying is right. I had an experience where I met a young artist, and he was yeah, I do rap on SoundCloud or whatever. And I was cool. And we had connected, and I'd sent him my stuff, and the next time I saw him or something, he was yeah, I checked out your stuff, it's cool. I was surprised. He said something I was surprised how long you've been doing music. And he probably didn't mean it like the way I heard it, but as an older artist in my 30s, not older, but
Sure.
somebody who's not in my 20s, I heard it like, I've been doing this for quite a while to not have gotten like to not have metrics. I feel like that represent further progress. That and to somebody like him, as a younger artist, like it's not that hard either to game social media in a way that generates an audience, and especially if you do it a lot. And I feel like that's one of the big things that they have, younger artists now, is they don't have these reservations about utilizing tech, utilizing social media. Like everybody knows what these things are for. Everybody knows that it's about cultivating an audience, and there's nothing embarrassing about that. But for some people stuck in their ways, I don't know who I'm talking about, but for some older musicians who have beards and stuck in their ways,
Sure.
it's a more of a intimidating thing to kind of be willing to acknowledge something like that, like to go into that space that's like, okay, I'm utilizing this tool not just to nobly be like, oh, witness my art, but it's also about like creating a community around my art of people who want to do it or whatever. It's like about building an audience,
Sure.
which I think is something I haven't wanted to admit for a very long time. They don't seem to have ill feelings about that.
I don't think they know any different. I think that is their like DIY space.
Yeah.
That is their like playground to communicate. And I mean, and maybe it's I don't know. I would think that maybe in some ways we have some kind of, we've been graced with the material knowledge of putting things together and doing things. And then, because sometimes you meet some younger artists that have come up in this like digital sphere, and you do meet a lot of young artists that like, I mean, I guess maybe we were the same way too when we were like 19, thinking like this is going to happen in like 3 or 4 years or something, it's going to, we're going to take off, or something like that. Or that's kind of a mentality. And so I could maybe see from a 20-year-old, thinking that like, I don't know, it's hard to think about trajectory and long-term, like artistry and like where that can really take you, and maybe how long it takes, you know what I mean? Or just that, like, I guess for me personally, with my personal art, I'm really happy with the place that I'm at with it, and I'm contented, and I make work that I love, and like where it goes from there. I guess with me, with like my personal Instagram, I forget to like post things and do things about myself. I mean, I'm really active on the culture page, but it's just, I'm just putting out everybody else's stuff, and it kind of feels like an easier kind of motion for me to just, do that more so. That's how it's felt for me doing Red House too. It's like I have no reservations at all about promoting the podcast episodes, to promote other people, to like talk about that and engage people. But I have a much harder time kind of doing that with just me. And I don't even think of my personal Instagram as a personal one. It is personal, I guess, but it was always supposed to be my music one, but like, it's hard to tell that it is sometimes. Sometimes it was just pictures of me working at Aperture. Sometimes it's like talking about a show. Like I haven't really, that's another thing. I haven't really made a distinction between the real me and the artistic me, like some people have. It's always been, they're just the same. They're not, they don't serve different purposes. They're just the fucking same. And I think that's kind of worked against me. I think this idea of authenticity in art is something that we like to pretend like is a great idea, but I think maybe it's best when people kind of let their artistic persona be separate from their real self, personally. And part of the reason I say that, I think part of the reason I'm thinking about that is one of my guilty pleasures when I'm wanting to listen to YouTube in the background is like listening to these weird stories of these young creators and their sort of like ups and downs. Like a lot of people get famous on TikTok or YouTube or any platform, and their careers burn up.
And I think that's partly because they don't have like gatekeepers and industry executives and stuff protecting them from pitfalls and shit like that. I think that part of the reason that we have kept those separate for so long is because people do fuck up, and when their persona becomes valuable, it's a good thing to separate it from their real self, because as we've been seeing for like the last decade, people's real selves are often hiding a lot of stuff in their closet, you know?
Yeah, it's weird. I mean, I guess with all the like flash in the pan kind of like hot shooting star kind of people, you know, like I guess TikTok people or whatever, it's just, I guess this just the sustainability of the artistry is I mean, I guess it's like you can do something weird, and like that could be your like platform to like build your, I mean, like with like TikTok stuff or whatever, you could just, I'm gonna do something offbeat, and then that's what could project somebody like to somewhere, and then once you get there, it's like you're in the entirety of your platform is based off of some like one moment of something that you did that like is not, you know what I mean? Where I guess it's like if you're like a career musician or you're a career artist, you've been playing music for years and years and years and years and years and years and years, and you have that like within you, and so then if you did get to a point where you're on a bigger stage or on a bigger platform, you have that like that grounding, and you have that like background of like experience and like rich artistry that you've built. You know, it's like, it's the difference between like a brick house and a paper house or something. You know, those things just come and go, I would think, you know, the instant fame or whatever, you know, whatever that would be. And, you know, but that's kind of a, you know, I don't know.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Like, yeah, I mean, you think of the context of art, like, in music terms, like you think of some of those late albums by like artists like Johnny Cash or Levon Helm, and the reason they're so, part of the reason that adds to their iconic status is that it's like at the end of their career, you know, after it's got this huge legacy of stuff that leads up to the context for it. And they're so, it's interesting that they take these simple forms, these like down home rootsy forms, because it's like all that led them back to where they started or something. Like there's this beautiful story that it's a part of the context of. And you compare that then to like, yes, these unfamiliar territories that young creative kids are in, that they just like, I mean, like the silliest example I can think of, I know nothing of these people. I'm going to sound like a fucking idiot saying this shit, but, you know, people kept making jokes on Instagram about these guys about being island boys, island boy guys. Yeah. And I saw their hair and I saw what they looked like, and I was like, okay. And people were like, yeah, they're famous because they do this thing where they say we're island boys. Right. And I was like, all right, I got it. I know the story now. Sure. Within like whatever, 6 months, I think, then I was seeing clips of them float around on social media on like Logan Paul's podcast, like getting in a fight with people because somebody was making fun of them. Like they quickly shifted into this territory of like, clearly them and other personalities come to mind where they like pop and then they think they can maintain it, but they just can't maintain it. Like it doesn't have that slow build. It doesn't have that crispy burn. And then like when you're associated nationally with just one moment, right? People don't want more moments from you. They just want, they're just going to relive that meme moment for a long time. That's what you're good for.
I think if they, like you said, like quality control or about these artists, I mean, I think if an artist like that could link up with some other creative people that might have a more background and could maybe give them some direction or like ghost write some things, you know what I mean? If you have a network of people that can sustain someone like that, then you might can have some longevity. Yeah. And who knows? Those people might have some longevity out of. They might be secret geniuses or something. Maybe. You know what I mean? They might have a bunch of tricks up their sleeve. You never know. But
maybe.
Yeah. I mean, it's very this kind of like one of the books that I lent you.
Yes, which I will return to tonight.
No, I was because you said something to me about it in a message. And I had forgotten, but I was looking for one of the books. It's a Society of the Spectacle. It's a French book that was written maybe in the, I don't know, maybe the 1930s or 40s. I can't remember. No, maybe it was later. Maybe it was like the 50s or 60s during like the existentialism thing. But the society, that book talks about, you know, as society progresses, you know, we're visual creatures. And the more that we kind of like present this like visual nature that like, it's like what kind of like birthed like happenings in the 60s, you know, these kind of like like a momentary, like we're going to fill an entire room with a bunch of rubber tires and invite a bunch of people just to come and like play. And it's like these kind of like these happenstantial things, you know. This book talks about how, you know, and it also goes back to, there's this other, like the simulacra and the simulation, this like philosophy book by this guy Baudrillard. He talks about like how, and this all is really like prophetic, like avant philosophy stuff that these guys are. And it was kind of coming out of like deconstruction and all these kinds of like thought processes. But the society spectacle talks about, as like society progresses, you know, the spectacle of the thing becomes more the weight of it than maybe the content of the thing. And it's like really like, you know, if you kind of like contextualize that to like modern day, like the Island Boys, they look radical. You know, there's nobody else on earth that looks like the Island Boys.
Yeah.
You know, and so like you're like, yeah, that's some like, you know, wild stuff, you know. And so you can't help but like look.
Yeah.
It's the spectacle, you know. You can't help but like notice it, and then like, you know, but then what's behind that? It's like a facade. It's some kind of like you guys got tatted up and your hair looks wild, and then at the end of the day, you know, that's what you are.
Yeah.
You know, and then I guess the whole thing about like with like TikTok and this kind of like this like pantomime culture, it's all like this like simulacra of, I mean, because you like listen to, talking with a friend of mine, he's you know Austin Fowler. Do you know who that is?
Austin Fowler?
I used to play music. Well, we came up playing music in like punk bands in high school together.
Man, that name sounds familiar too. I'm not sure.
He's my best friend, and we get together a lot. And he's kind of like a cultural critic, or you know, he's more of a cultural critic than I'm. Not really a critic, I don't think, but I'm more of a purveyor of culture. But you know, we talk about these things and how it's we've entered this weird like pantomime culture, and listening to like looking at like the Grammy nominations or looking at like young music, you see all these like this music being made by young people, and it's all kind of like in some wheelhouse of things you've heard and experienced before.
Yeah,
you know, nothing's really like outside the box in some ways, or it's like kind of like contained in this weird thing, and it's all like a simulacra of culture. And basically what that means, it's like a false representation of something that's already been done. You know, it's like somebody that stands out there and he looks like Dwight Yoakam, he sounds like Dwight Yoakam, he's, you know, essentially Dwight Yoakam. He's, you know, he's like a puppet, you know, version of that man or whatever. But it's like this weird kind of like confluence of culture now, that these young people are brought up with this like medium that like encourages you to pantomime songs, and you know, and it kind of becomes like this recursive, like just repetitious, like we're just doing this, you know, spinning this thing like ever tighter. I
mean, not to mention the way that same thing has started to express itself socially. I mean, bro, like TikTok is a strange territory now. And like, so there's a podcast I really love that's a comedy podcast, and I'm really into it. And one of their things is to they really celebrate some of what you were talking about, like some of the more fringe material that can be found on TikTok. We were talking about this a little bit ago or whatever. And that led me to discover what some people are doing on there, like this. Just this thing that we're doing within society, where our sense of reality is starting to be challenged. The boundaries around reality are being kind of fought about, and people are slugging that out. That's being expressed on TikTok in a really strange way that some people aren't even aware of. But the way that people are like, there's a lot of debates that happen on TikTok around like people are pantomiming basically mental illnesses. I don't know if you've seen this at all, but it happens a lot, and people are choosing these different mental illnesses and sort of acting them out, and then it erupts on TikTok. People who like actually suffer with these afflictions call them out, and people who are like in this crowd of people who just think it's interesting to act like you have these illnesses.
Yeah.
They defend them. Like, it's a strange territory now where not only in the arts are we pantomiming, but within every sense of what can define an identity, we are pantomiming.
Exactly. Yeah, and I've been kind of contemplating that and saying that for some time now. I think that like the more that we're in this machine, the more like of an identity crisis. I think that like culturally, like it's across the board, and I think that if you had the like luck or fortune of growing up outside of that and shaping your identity through like real experience and real connection and real kind of just like developing who you are, like you and I, like we're outside of that in some way. Like, I don't think that we have any worry of having any kind of identity crisis or anything in that kind of respect. That, but it is really weird, and I know exactly what you're talking about though. Yeah. Because it feels like this, like, I think at the end of it, if someone has an identity crisis, the main thing that they want to do is be like affirmed, or like, they want to feel like taken care of, and they want to be like, it's almost everybody just wants to be taken care of. Everybody wants to feel some level of like comfort and acceptance, and it's just like a child in many ways. It's like if you're not getting your way or you're not getting what you need, you're going to act out. Yeah. And you're going to act out in ways that are like faking mental illness is like not cool. Right. To all parties involved, it comes across as it's more of a personality disorder than a mental disorder, by any rate. Yeah. But it's I mean, I guess more it's sad to see, I guess, or sad to like think about that people go there to get some kind of like fulfillment, or to feel like, it's like kind of in conversation if someone says like, oh, I'm feeling this kind of way, and it kind of comes across as, not that you can't express yourself and open up to other people, but sometimes it feels as if that like that person is seeking some sort of validation or some sort of like, oh man, you're not like that. Come on, buddy. Like it kind of puts the ball in the other person's court to lift you up. Yep. And to like make you kind of feel worth. And so it's just very strange, It is very strange. It's very kind of that we've gotten to this point. People just look at their phones too much.
That's a huge part of it. We're also, I mean, a lot of the things that used to bind our identity, it's fluctuated a lot over time. And like, I guess one way that I've heard it said was that our identity, we didn't even used to think too much about our identity at a certain time period in our life, because like post, I'm not talking about like in our native existence where our identity was sort of defined by our first step into adulthood, like improving our manhood or whatever. Yeah. We're talking like post-civilization. People, I've heard it said that people kind of used to just surrender their identity to basically the service of the church and stuff. And that like, the church was a really good, useful mechanism for helping figure out what society needed to do. Like, what do we need? Do we need like a blacksmith now? Do we need like people to work in this? Like, what does our little community here need in order to continue to sustain itself? And you kind of surrendered your sense of personal achievement to this idea of the greater good through that mechanism. And I don't know when that changed or whatever, but I think from some documentaries that I listened to back in the day or watched back in the day, I think they were called Century of the Self. It was really in the 21st century and like post the 60s that this fascination with identity started to kind of really erupt like everywhere, like within the mainstream of Western civilization. And
It's all that existentialism, all
Yeah.
that existentialist thought that, like, I think really like out of like World War II, like the World Wars,
Right.
were really what like have, if you think about it, like the industry that was built around like preparing countries for war, you know, really the industries that like built nations. You know, America was after World War II, everything that we put into building like tanks and airplanes and like infantry and all these things, all these infrastructures that we built, all these factories that we made just to make like death machines. At the end of that, you know, it's like, well, you know, the advancement in technology has got like by leaps and bounds, like having to like do this like war thing. It's what like took us to space in the 60s. You know, all these kind of like, German militant, scientists that were doing experiments, and with technology and
Yeah.
stuff. I mean,
Yeah.
like revolutionized science, revolutionized medicine, revolutionized technology, because we all had to like level up to like to an extent that like is beyond human understanding, in many ways. It's like, if you I think about this, like sometimes, like to think that, okay, before there were photographs, before there were recorded music, the leap to get to where like you can take something that you make, the music that you make, and encapsulate it into like anything that you can pass it to somebody else or repeatedly like play.
Right.
Could you do that? Could I do that with just like the materials that we have around us, like metal and rock and
Right.
like, your telephone is nothing but a bunch of rock, and like plastic and all these kind of like, lots of synthetic materials that we've developed. But it's like this kind of like, there's this one like future theory that's like, as like the technology goes up, like human, like understanding of the technology is going down.
Oh, I'm sure.
And it's like none of us can build a phone, unless we work for the phone company or something. It's like the way these things are developing are beyond like just the schematics of those things. I couldn't look at it and make a telephone, or,
Straight
what
up.
I mean?
Straight up. I couldn't make a camera,
Oh, surely.
Whoops.
Yeah. And to think that like we reached the point with all these sciences and technology that like people were starting to like, we can capture an image. We can capture reality onto this like through these like chemicals and this like process.
Dude, I think about that. Like,
Yeah.
I think about if I could, I don't know, if you could I mean, I think I probably borrowed this from a comedian somewhere along the way, but if you could step into the past by maybe 200 years and just show Ben Franklin or some fucking buddy, like,
Oh, yeah.
this is what shit is like now. Like, can you
Right.
believe this? And this is also, by the way, how we talk now. We don't use the same formality. Like, we cuss a lot. You can just relax. Sometimes I think, would Ben Franklin be like, oh, cool, I can just use like a really basic vocabulary, or would he be? Would he say, this is preposterous?
Yeah. I watched this is really interesting. I watched a clip reel. So I love film, and I love especially like, say maybe like 40s to 60s and then going on into the 70s, but especially like that era of film. I'm really, really into it. But I found this clip reel of outtakes from black and white films in the 40s. And it was so like all these kinds of like a blooper reel, essentially, of this just like, and these people are the most foul-mouthed, like when the camera's off, they are just like if they mess up, they're so just like, but and I was like, whoa, it was extremely like, from when they like, when they messed up, it was just like off the rails, and it was. I'll send that to you.
Please do.
Yeah.
I'm going to say this again. I'm
Yeah.
noticing that I am not protecting my ideas very much, and I guess I'm fine with that. Like, if somebody steals this and runs with it, I don't care. But
Sure.
I love that you just said that, because for a while now I've occasionally I write a song that is this thing that reminds me of the 40s or the 50s, but there's something wrong with it culturally. Like, I wrote a song that I had Victoria sing on that I've never released or anything, but it's interesting because it's this song that's beautiful, and it sounds like something from then. It sounds like a Sinatra sentiment, like yeah, classic piece of music. But there's this suggestion in there
Sure.
that the characters committed an affair. And the idea I had for some of these songs was like, I want to write a musical, and what I want is to kind of approach it like White Christmas was. Like it's a musical that you're in that time period, and the music is part of the story. It's not really like the same, and it's a part of a production. But what I want to do with it is separate this idyllic version we have in our mind of the 50s and show what it really was, this time period of vulgarity and abuse and like alcoholism, like horrible shit, kind of. If you could imagine Revolutionary Road with White Christmas, I think that's the idea, but a musical.
Yeah.
So maybe you can help me write it.
Yeah, that would be fun. I love, especially the film of that era. It just really is. I don't know. It's just beautiful and wonderful, and it's because in my studio at my house, I have a projector that I project against. I have it like on one side of the room, and it projects on the far wall. It's like a 15-foot projection in my studio, and so like I've just ever since we had our daughter, I like didn't have as much like me time or like studio time or like time to like work on myself. So now I just like stay up late every night, like all night basically, and like work, make music or paint or watch movies or do whatever, read, and just soaking in like all these movies, and just I'll send you some links because I have these ongoing film playlists of full length films on YouTube.
Yeah.
And I think I have like 12 playlists now, and they have a couple hundred each.
Oh man. Yeah.
But really fell in love with like Soviet cinema from the 60s. Really amazing, wild stuff that they did. It's really kind of the kind of beauty of it is, and like after like watching so many like Soviet films and being kind of into that, they've got this special thing that's like, and you could even watch like Russian thing. You can even look at Russian music now and Russian things now, and they still do this. It's like simultaneously like folk, like they never forget or they never deny. That's kind of like folksy, like almost kind of not country, but just this folksy element to
everyman kind of vibe.
Yeah, or even just this like traditional folkness.
Okay.
This traditional like folk kind of spirit, and they would still keep traditional clothing, like they keep their traditions alive in that culture, but then also it's like simultaneously like really avant-garde. And so I think the convergence of the folk and the avant-garde makes some kind of like weird like spark of like genius, and they're masters of it. They're like, or it seems that way, because even there's groups now like there's this Russian group called Ice Peak, and they're like a political, like extreme band. It's like this guy and this girl, and they make just like really edgy, wild content. But they're like, you watch and it's like, or like a hard bass music, which is like Russian like techno music that's kind of become popular in the past couple years. All the melodies of it are like old like Soviet like like lines and stuff, like melodies and things like that, to this like extreme like fast like goofy techno music.
Very curious.
And so it's like it's kind of I think it's just but it's a natural thing that they do. It's almost kind of like and that's really like what kind of like I really get into is when people don't lose their culture, and people kind of like retain some kind of, they're modern, but they're also like, they're still the old people in some ways. They're still like the old world and new world, like living side by side, and not really kind of like trying to put anything away, not trying to put away your like past or anything.
I'd be into that.
Yeah.
I that's a hard balance to strike. And it's really interesting to me that that you're talking about the Soviet Union, because they had, just as a just as an interesting side note, thinking about art in the past and what we're talking about. I mean, what we're talking about is sort of maintenance of the past and sort of the innovation of moving forward into some new territory, old territory, new territory. And like in the 20th century, like there were two distinct regimes that had a fight about that. One of them was Nazi Germany and one of them was the Soviet Union, and they had very different philosophies concerning art, and art was crucial to those two movements or whatever. But the Nazis used it to promote structure and to kind of create disgust for avant-garde, create disgust for chaos, create disgust for basically the sense of the future or a new direction, and return people to traditionalism. Whereas the Soviet Union basically employed the artists to represent the philosophy of the Soviet Union.
For sure.
They encouraged the arts. It just couldn't be counter-revolutionary. And if it was, they would, then you were in trouble. But otherwise, they would sponsor the arts. They'd pay you to make art as long as it didn't go against their, philosophy for the future.
Oh, for sure. But then also a lot of the Soviet artists did a lot of really subversive, like really tricky little things. Because you watch a lot of these movies and like in the context now, looking at it, it's like, this is wild. What they're doing is like, it has a bigger social commentary by doing, like, they could set something in like the old days, but like what they're really tackling is like really, 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 they're walking some lines.
And you said these are from the 40s?
Yeah, there's some from the 40s, and my favorite stuff is from the 60s. And there was just some beautiful, like wild, weird films. There's a Ukrainian filmmaker and cinematographer. His name's Yuri Ilyenko. He made this movie called The Eve of Ivan Kupalo. And it's like a folk tale. It's based off of the writer Gogol. It's one of his stories that he wrote. And so basically it's about this. It's set like in some kind of like old town. But it's about this guy. He falls in love with this girl. The dad doesn't want them to marry. But then all of a sudden this demon comes to town with this like horde of these like his like demon people. And it's like, I mean, but the cinematography on this is like the most like psychedelic, like weird thing, but it's so folksy. It's like all in this like folk village, but this like when the demon comes to town, he's this like 6 foot like red bearded like crazy looking guy riding a pig, and they use this like cut kind of like scenes of him coming in with, and the audio of it's just like out of this world, like crazy. And then when they get to this bar in the town, all the bad guys take it over, but the whole scene is filmed in reverse. And they flip it, or they film the scene and then they reverse it. So there's like, they're in this like tavern, and like all these like crazy looking like demon guys are hanging out. But there's like chickens fighting like on the table, but it's all in reverse. And so it's really like psychedelic and wild and like hard to watch, but beautiful. But the story goes that, so there's this like folk tale that like on this one night of the year, the eve of Ivan Kupalo, there's a fern flower that grows in the forest. So then the main character, he's the demon tells him, go into the forest and like find this fern flower, and I'll make this woman fall in love with you, or I'll make like her dad cool with it or whatever, basically. And so then he does, but he ends up through this like dealing with these like dark forces, the character goes mad. And that's kind of like, that's the movie.
Okay.
But the way that it's shot and like these like scenes are just so just like out of this world beautiful, and just like really just, I don't know, it's like nothing I've ever seen.
That one's on YouTube?
Yeah, I'll send you the link.
Please do.
Yeah.
I want to check this out for sure. I'm glad we have this in common. I used to find movies from the 20s, kind of the early, maybe 30s, like some of the earliest cinema stuff, and some of that shit is on YouTube. And it's like, I never knew that there were like hour and a half, 2 hour long movies from back then that had audio and stuff, and they were all more like a play, like set in one room, and characters would come in and out of that room. It was almost as if they hadn't discovered, and maybe at the time you couldn't move cameras around as easily, And at the time, plays were where movies had come from. So they were like approaching it as if it was a play and utilizing it in that way. A bunch of those old studio movies like Trip to Mars or whatever it was called, Trip to the Moon, something like that.
Yeah.
They were all just studio movies prior to
That's a special movie though. That George Méliès did that.
Yeah.
Have you seen? There's they hand painted all that, which is like
Yes.
really it's
amazing.
it's wild.
Yeah,
it's really.
Did you see the remake of that? And or not remake, but they re-released it in like 2012 or maybe 2014 with modern music over it.
I haven't seen that now.
It was less. It wasn't as awesome as it could have been because the music was just. I don't know. They tried to take it into this psychedelic place, and it sounded dated to me, even when they had put it out when it was brand new. But anyway, that Netflix had put it out with some modern music over top of it. But yeah, those hand painted cinema movies are such an important piece of like creative history.
Oh, for sure. There's an amazing Soviet film. It's the is it Alibaba and the 40 Thieves? One of those, I think that's what it is, but it's a hand painted.
It was
Soviet film from the 40s, I think.
Huh.
And it's wild. I mean, there's like one of the antagonist characters is like some blue guy with like these like pointy ears and stuff, and he painted blue, But it's really amazing.
Yeah, I love that shit.
But it's like it kind of goes back to that, just the inventiveness. And the like kind of just having to kind of just make things work, and the using the imagination to take things to another level is really kind of, there's something special in that,
Absolutely.
And they did it really well,
I mean, yeah, they created new shit. I mean, that was a different territory.
Just raw invention.
I mean, podcasts were that probably 10 years ago, and TikTok might be that arguably to some people. I don't know. We're still trying to do things, but
sure.
I love stepping back into the past and seeing some of that. So I look forward to you sharing some of that stuff with me. I look forward to seeing that.
For sure.
Cool.
Yeah.
That was fun.
Yeah.
I guess I won't keep you any longer, man, but
I could talk all night. We're good.
I could too. I feel like the camera will fill up soon, but well, anyway, Zach, really enjoyed talking to you.
Thank you, me too.
Sorry I was an asshole to you so long ago.
It's all forgotten. Yeah. No, I think that, I mean, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
But I think like also like my personality was to poke the bear too, and it's kind of, it's okay.
My personality was like way underdeveloped for the arts. And I felt, thinking back on it, I think I felt subject to the popular culture in King at the time at that coffee shop.
Yeah.
So I think that's all. I just felt whatever, subject to their judgment. And that was what was so wrong about it, was like, it was just being subject to the wrong judgment. So
sure.
But I used to be, it took me years to stop being an asshole, and it's only been recently that I've started to get better at it. So still, I regret the times that I have been, that I'm blatantly aware of.
Sure. But I mean, like, you're a different person now.
Yeah.
And that accounts for a whole lot.
Yeah.
And I know it's like, I mean, kind of reflecting on, I think sometimes if you have like a sphere that you exist in,
yeah,
and that's maybe all or that's all, or you feel protective over that, or you feel like so like linked and like connected, and you're like, this is my universe.
Exactly.
And so I think sometimes if you're not prepared for anybody to come into that universe and shake things up, it can be hard.
Yeah.
And it can be like aggressive,
That's the perfect way to say it. And
yeah.
I think, and that's what I mean about being underdeveloped, because in the arts, people do that all the time. And as an artist, you're doing that to everybody else. You're disrupting people's peace and their universe. And I learned to do that, and it was dangerous to do that for whatever. that's part of the territory of the arts.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I could, like, at the time, I don't think I could even dish it out, but I think I thought that I knew what it meant to be comfortable in that space of
Sure.
being challenged by art and artists. But,
Right.
you know, I wasn't. I was just a naive kid who had never experienced anything outside of King. And so, for context, I just was very, for anybody who might be listening to this part, like I was just really aggressively rude and cruel and like challenging to you. And
I'll tell the story if you want me to tell the story of what went down. So everybody's like, "Gosh, what happened?" With
If
these
you
guys?
want,
I'll paint you in a positive light.
I won't.
No, I played with Dylan at the coffee shop, and the only way that I knew how to play drums was extremely loud. And you told me, "Don't play drums so loud." And in my mind, I was like, I don't know if I can play quietly and like do the thing.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not a drummer, but I can play the drums. And the only way that I ever know how to play drums is like I just, beat them.
Yeah.
And it was a small space, and you're like, "Don't play so loud." I'm like, I didn't know what. I'm like, I can't. I tried to play quiet, but I was just like wasn't playing that good. And I think you got frustrated with that because I think that I probably came across, and I probably was being probably like, so what, and that's kind of, so what, and that's that's it,
Yeah.
and I mean, and I think we had some words in the parking lot.
We did, yeah. That's the part I regret most because definitely I was like very aggressive toward you, and I've had a lot of moments in life where when I've had the chance to look back, I calmed down almost instantly, and I realized that I'm being an ass and that I shouldn't be. And with that one, I think you and I ended up following up with conversations after that. I was still being a dick to you, and then one day it just switched. Because I was I was very aggressive toward you, and one day it just.
I think you wanted to fight me.
I did. I was like expressing a willingness
I was like, dude,
to fight you.
No,
That was what it was. You were like, I'm not doing that, and then the veil fell, and I was like, wow, I'm being insane right now. And then I just was like, oh, I'm sorry. I guess you're right. And anyway, I don't know why I used to be that way. At one point in my life, I did want to fight the world, and just I had a lot of aggression that wasn't really, what's the word? It wasn't brought into my person. It was like my shadow, and it was not
misplaced aggression.
Yeah, misplaced aggression. So anyway, but it's one of those occasions that I know I really feel bad about that. But. I'm glad that you graciously alleviate that stress for me.
Oh man, no, it's like it's just kind of one of those things where we all change.
Yeah,
and we're all like, look at you now, and you're definitely not the same.
Yeah,
I mean, obviously, so in to a multitude of degrees. It's just like I wouldn't want anyone to hold anything against me for something I did when I was 18. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's like, why would I do that to someone else? And why would you let someone's present state be dictated by just a blip?
Well,
it doesn't,
I'm glad you think that. And, and I like to think that too, but with yourself, sometimes it's you feel a different sense of responsibility. But
for sure.
I mean, you're right. Obviously, time has passed, and you and I, and I think when I saw you at that show in Winston, that was one of the first times that I'd reconnected with you, and I'm just very glad that we've had the opportunity to kind of stay in touch over the years and talk about books and shit like that. So glad that wasn't how I have to be, how we have to remember one another in each other's lives.
No, it was the dreadlocks talking, man. I think that's what it was.
I think they were a little too tight.
Yeah, it was the dreadlocks talking. Yeah, you can't hold anything against the guy with dreadlocks.
Nope.
That cut the dreadlocks. I don't know. I'm just being funny, but no. But yeah, man, it's all
Yeah,
it's kind of. I mean, I'm at the point in my life and my kind of artistry and that I don't have time to hold anything against anyone, or you know what I mean. It's just what good is that going to do me?
Yeah.
Or what good is it going to do anyone if you kind of resent and focus on something that just doesn't even matter?
Yeah.
Let's just get along and make some awesome things happen.
I love it.
That's the way I feel.
I love it.
Yeah.
Well, on that note, I mean, I guess we can let it rest there, and then
Okay.
I hope we will get the chance to make some awesome things happen
dude,
here in the near
I'd love
future.
to.
And I'm going to come see your space soon.
Yeah,
so
please do come out.
We'll make that happen.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
All right. Well, we'll shut this portion down, and I'll go find your books.
Okay. That sounds good, buddy.